ever seen. Cannabis club category, certified Cali green. Type of bomb that I keep up in my sack. They give a lot of cats anxiety attacks. There's no denying the facts. But enough about the weed though. I keep it on a need to know basis. It's time for me to cut to the chase quick. So download this free LP. Spread it to your friends and family. Even to the little haters mad at me. I got 2 official LPs coming after these. So far I'm grateful for the love that's coming back to me. Truly appreciate the support, especially my peeps that had my back when I was going in and out of court. But of course a shout out to all my people. They kept the game alive instead of killing it. Selling out with weak flows, my crew. Anyone that gave an honest point of view. Much respect besides me, man. I do this shit for you, yeah, for you.
I think most girls and boys like to play games. In fact, adults like to play games also. In this game, it's very important to listen to all the instructions. We're going to combine things easily.
Pop, so suspect. Now as my rhyme surpasses, see visions are overpasses. Some choose to overlook it. They should be looking past it. We hope for classics. We over you whack bastards. Soul suspects, man, we fall from the average. People try to act like they shit don't stink. They'll be up shit's creek, plus their ship's gonna sink. Now they knee deep in bullshit with nothing to think. On the brink of dealing with the most unpleasant of things. Time switch up, find ways to humble your strut. Just when you was thinking you was the next runner up. Shit out of luck, yo, it's just the way it goes. I ain't gotta stress the rest, all you already know. From a distance, street lights start to filter in. Home from a round trip, had to visit new lands. Back in the building again, back from building with fam. Spaced out, sleep deprived, staring at the ceiling fan. Like, damn. So many things that they said to us when we was kids, but it was all bullshit. Yeah, open up your eyes. They would try to tell us one thing, then say the next thing. So I say, never listen to the lies. Man, everyone's a critic. Just spit it how you live, it's how it's meant to be intended. So open up your eyes. It's all part of the game, ain't nothing but a dang dog. So I say, learn to read between. Yo, you going at it all wrong, so open your eyes. Yo, them cats be living life like they got 9 lives, so don't try. I hit very hard for my size 6'2", a little over 185, so get it right. They tough talk is filled with fallacies. Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. So please, they can go and try to play the road as positive, but either way they talk with it, we know when they prerogative. Even if they polish up their image with some party tracks, we see through the lies, we ain't even need a polygraph. This is passion, the vibe is everlasting. It's better than the last one and colder than the aspens. Used to be overreacting, now I'm overreacting. Not pissed off, I'm mad, I mean I'm over here laughing. Shit is crazy, ain't it? The game is crazy, tainted. But I'ma do my thing and stay crazy fade. So many things that they said to us when we was kids, but it was all bullshit. Yeah, open up your eyes. They would try to tell us one thing, then say the next thing. So I say, never listen to.
I think we're live. What is going on, folks? Microphone is on. Things I think are working. Welcome. And what's going on? I hope everyone is having a good, I'm going to go with Wednesday. I think Wednesday today. I hope everyone's staying home and having a good day of isolation and a productive day of isolation and staying safe, washing your hands, doing all the things we're supposed to be doing right now. What is going on, Michaela? It's good to see you. Mikola? I think maybe Mikola. Little brain fart on that one. But good to see you. Glad to hear you have a glass of wine. I am here with my beer. Trusty as always. Trying not to assault the gods again. Looks like we have Daniel in the chat. What's going on, bud? Milan is here. There you go. Little naps. You know, we all need them from time to time. I'm a huge fan of taking some naps. Luca, there you go. Good to hear, buddy. Good to have you here. Luis, Erica, hello. Thank you guys for coming. I think we're going to have a fun day today. I'm actually not sure how it's going to turn out, at least the end of it. The beginning, I'm just going to kind of go over the basics of how I use normal maps in post-production when I do. And the latter part, we're going to try to make an image like just using like a normal map and then depth masks and maybe a ambient occlusion render. So that's going to be a challenge. I've never done that before. We'll see. It might be really cool. It might be a complete and utter disaster. No way to really know just yet. Stefan, you got a beer as well. Loving it. We're bringing back, well, at least for those of us in the United States, we're bringing back beer lunches. At least I am. For those of you in a time zone that it's normal to be having a drink right now, I'm going to appreciate the effort nonetheless. Okay, so let's get started. All right. Got my pen. Got to find the right camera. that shows the right screen to be looking at here. Cintiq Pro. There we go. Transition. Okay. So I hope you guys can see, really just the best rendering I've produced in a very, very long time. We are looking at just like a sphere on a plane. The important thing to know is that we've rendered out this pass, though. Most of you are probably used to normals being used within a texture as basically a better version of a bump map. They generally are purplish and then have all these kind of other colors in them. And the kind of basic idea for them, if you're not familiar, is that you have specific colors that are saying which direction things are going. And we're not going to be talking about using these for textures in materials or anything else. And that's a whole different topic that we're not going to get into today. But let's pick a color we can draw with. But you can see that like every surface that's facing this direction is obviously this kind of magenta color. Everything over here is this kind of like cyan green. Down starts to get yellow in this. And up has kind of this purplish color. And blue is facing towards us. Depending on your software and what your settings are, you might have the same map and it might be in these colors, which is the difference between, sorry, I've got to mute this guy. Let's go with do not disturb. Bada bing. And this has to do whether you're using world space to generate the colors or camera space. And there are situations where that matters. For what we're doing, it doesn't really matter in post, which one you want to do. At least if it does, I don't know why it would. So anyway, so let's take a look at how we would use this, but hopefully that kind of makes sense at least of what's going on, is that we're able to select color ranges that give us the direction that the face is facing, the normal is. So let's look at this guy. So here we have another box, which is like the simplest of things to quickly do a painting on. And you wouldn't really need a normal for this, but I think it'll at least hopefully get the idea across of kind of how I use these in post. So that if, let's say, we just have this group here, that is isolating the box itself. So let's make the whole thing stand out just a little bit. So if we wanted to really quickly like select the top face, we could just select that color, and then we can make another map here. And then we can brighten up the top, right? Super duper simple. We can do the same thing with this face, right? And we can just, there's some weird things that happen, and I don't know why. I've not fully figured it out. I'm using color range. We'll talk about that in a second. There's some weird things that happen if you have a map selected when... like a mask selected on a layer, and then you go and select color range. So you always kind of want to move to another one. And I'm going to make that mistake all day long today. And it's just, I don't use this enough to have that kind of fully down. But you can see in like the simplest thing, we have an idea of a lighting direction at this point. Which is super simple, and I'm using these just with curves layers, but we could, by the same token, if we wanted to paint like a gradient of light kind of coming across this face, we could do the same thing, which is select this face, bada bing, bada boom, and we could paint in it. And let's just grab a soft brush, and we hide the selection so we can see what we're doing. You can see that we're kind of starting to paint a little bit of shadows and the like in here. Oops, let's go a little bit softer on that. All right. And then we say, okay, I actually like the way that that's looking, which means I want to paint this one darker. Pixels were selected. Okay. And then we can go in and just grab a darker black or gray, and we can start to paint this in. It's always easier if you're painting with these selections, and they tend to get messy when they get more complex than like a perfect box. You can press Control H in Photoshop to hide the selection. So it's still selected, you just can't see those marching ant outlines. All right, so we can kind of get an idea of what we're doing. Maybe we want to put in a little bit of light down here, or whatever it might be, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea, right? We're painting a little bit of color, or excuse me, value in this case. And we're using normal maps to select the faces that we want, the direction that we want. Make this just a little bit better, but to be honest, this, you know, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the box. Hopefully this is just kind of giving you guys an idea, right, of how you can use these, or at least like the general principles of it. And of course we could paint shadows in underneath. One thing that is worth noting and might be easier to look at if we look at the sphere, which is if we use the magic wand to select color, it uses a different algorithm based off this tolerance, which is basically how many points between 0 and 255 you're willing to select outside of what you click on. And if we grab, let's go a little bit lower in tolerance so that we can see what we're selecting. If I grab right there and then I make a mask with that, it's a all or nothing type of selection. It's either 100% or 0, which means if we go and actually try to raise that up, we get these weird patches. There might be a better way to use the magic wand that I just don't know of. And if you guys know of one, let me know. But so as a result, I don't use the magic wand for these selections. I use, select color range, which I have set to Control-Shift-R for when I want to use it. So that just brings up this little guy here. So if we select kind of that same-ish area and put a mask on, we get something that, like, you're still going to see some banding, but at least it's not a hard line, right? And we could blur this selection to minimize that if it's showing up. You do have to, if you use this technique, you do have to be careful of hard kind of pixelated edges or banding. It happens. Such is life. Is there anything else with selecting that's worthwhile? I'm sure we'll cover more stuff, but that's kind of how I select these. I tend towards using select color range. I found better results with that. So let's go to, so with the box example, obviously this is pretty simple, and making these selections would be super duper easy to do anyways. If we go to just a slightly more complex example, right, let's look at this little guy. We kind of have the same setup again, which is we have this folder that's masking it just to our object. Let's turn it up a little bit so that we can see it. So let's say if we wanted to do the same thing with this, it would be super, super complex, right, as far as selecting by hand goes. Trying to keep up with questions in the chat. Daniel, to soften that selection, I just use a Gaussian blur, which I use all of the time. With the map selected, you just go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And I just have that set to a shortcut as well, to blur things, because I blur a lot of stuff. And also, Vlad, Andre, Domenico, thank you guys for coming. Very happy to have you guys here. Same with you, Andre. Will feather on the mask work for softness? It depends. You could go into select range and soften it, or refine selection, which they renamed to something else. I forget what now. You could do that, and you could also use feather on the selection, but you don't have a ton of control, and what you are going to end up with is a gradient right at the edge, and what you really want is it to select more and less. So you want that actual information sliding across most of the time. So yes, you can use feather, and for tight selections that might help. For me, I just use select color range, and then if it looks really bad, I fix it either manually or with blurring, or it kind of varies. And I'm sure when we get to actually painting something cool, hopefully cool, let's not get ahead of ourselves, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of that. So anyways, so let's go back to this. So obviously the box is a very simple example. If we wanted to kind of start to light something like this again, or change the lighting on it, selections would be a pain in the ass. But this little map makes it pretty simple, right? So we can select all the faces coming back. I'm kind of thinking maybe it'll be cool. maybe it'll be cool. What I'm kind of thinking of doing is that we'll put we'll very quickly, and again, this is more to kind of show the idea behind this than anything else, but like maybe we'll have a light coming this direction, is kind of the idea. So right now we have all the faces painting back, and again, right now I'm just using curves, so boom, we already have like a bit of it actually is starting to make some sense here as to what we're looking at. It feels like this bottom area should be even darker. So we can clip a curves layer on top of it, make that dark, and invert that. And we'll just go back to our soft brush here, and painting with white into this mask. Oops, that's a little bit too tough. Make that a little bit darker as it gets down. All right, so that starts to make a little sense. And maybe we want the top surface to be a little bit lighter again. Knitting, we are using masks. We're using normals map to relight things in 2D after we're done in 3D. And just trying to explain the basic kind of principle of it here. So here, let's select the top pieces. Let's go ahead and So you can see like it goes from super duper flat. This is just lit with what's it called? Just like a gray sky dome going all the way around it. And so it's effectively an ambient occlusion render. And then boom, we start to have a little bit of direction to things. Now there's some things that are weird. We would expect that this line in here would be a little bit darker. And we can do that in two ways. We can paint directly into that mask, or if we want to be able to go back and forth, grouping it again, leaving the mask at the top and putting another mask on here, we can kind of go in and paint in some of these ambient occlusion again to make it a little bit more lifelike. Like that's going to still be pretty dark. That's going to be pretty dark. These guys are going to be pretty dark. Hopefully you can kind of get the idea of what we're doing in here. Maybe we get a little bit there. Something like that. And then maybe let's do one more. Let's maybe put a light coming in from the right. And so we can go back to this guy. We're going to get out of this mask again for the reasons I stated earlier, which is that select color range does weird things to maps. And grab this guy and color that. Put a mask on it. And so now we have some light coming in from the side. We're going to do the same thing we did before, which is leave that in a group on top of this curves. And we're just going to paint this light in where we want it. Because if we can imagine that light's kind of coming in a little bit from the back and off to the side, we know that these guys are going to get hit with light. And then like these guys are going to have little kind of cast shadows coming down on them, right? And we can just kind of, because we're clipped inside of like just the faces that have the normal direction to the right, we can kind of paint very, very sloppily and get the effect that we're still looking for. Right, so something like this is going to have a shadow here, something like that, and then we're going to have it cut here. The other nice thing about doing things this way, or the kind of added benefit you get, is it makes you think about how things get lit in a different way. And we can go ahead and kind of grab all of these guys and just paint them first. And let's paint them all, and then we're just going to tone it back just a little bit in some of these places where there would still be some shadows. This is obviously going to be a little bit darker. And so, you know, in what, like a minute there, we went from this to this without making any manual selections whatsoever. And I'm using this mostly with curves right here, but if you were painting in like reflected light in like an exterior rendering or something like that, you can be using these masks over normal layers set to screen or color dodge or multiply or whatever you're trying to do. It's this getting the selection, which is the important thing, and specifically because light is obviously very sensitive to the way that it's hitting, the normal that it's hitting a surface at. You can select surfaces by normals and just affect those as opposed to the object as a whole. Hopefully that made sense. If anything wasn't clear there, let me know. But then we have one more kind of example of how to use this, which is also with textures. So, excuse me. Here we have, it's still a grayscale rendering or a clay rendering or whatever you want to call it. But I have this texture driving the normal map. And this could be a bump and you'll still get this data when you render it afterwards. This happens to be a normal map from Real Displacement Textures, who makes some really cool stuff. But obviously almost all of that detail is washed away, particularly in the top, because light's coming down from all directions. And so we don't have any directionality to this. So let's try and maybe like quickly start to paint in some light onto this guy. So first, let's say, which direction do we want to do light for this? Maybe we'll do this like completely blacklit, because I think that'll be quickest and easiest. So first, let's lighten up the top as though it was reflecting something, and you can see now we have more information everywhere. So let's just grab, actually, since the texture is running this way, let's actually say that the light's coming in from the left. So let's kind of grab these green textures up here, green colors up here. That will be theoretically getting like the highlights on things. And again, we're just, for quickness, we're just going to go ahead and use some curves. And you're going to start to see the kind of like messiness you get in this. And it really depends on the image you're working on. You would need to clean this up a little bit if you're doing it for like a photorealistic perfect render. For a concept render, where I think you're more likely to be like trying to paint in lighting, or trying to fix something for like a draft that you're going to send to a client, you know, at 1:1, like, you know, that's fine. Absolutely fine, especially once we add some more stuff to it. Okay, so let's get that guy's kind of brightened up that way. Then let's get all of the kind of upward facing surfaces. And you can hold down shift when you're in color range to add to the selection, as you would expect. And so let's go ahead and put another one up here. So now we kind of start to have a top. If the light's coming in from the left, which is how I'm imagining it, then this right face is going to be dark. So let's go back to this guy, and we're going to select kind of all the colors over here. So I'm just kind of pressing shift and selecting a bunch of stuff. You can see we have these right-facing surfaces, right-facing bits on the other surfaces, but that's fine because they would naturally be in shadow as well. So let's start to bring them down a little bit. Something like that. You know, like you can see right now it kind of feels like it's a metallic box. But we can continue to work on that. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this one because I want to make something cool with the other one. But we'll do just a little bit more. Let's bring down some of the midtones on this side now. So something like that. Just a smidgy. And then one of the other things that we can do is going back to our normal map. We can select these faces, these kind of like yellowish colors that are on the downside. All right, oops. Oop, that might not be able to grab them. They might be a little bit too fine. Let's see what that gave us. And there's a little bit of kind of guesswork that ends up being in this. That's starting to look just a bit better. And then again, like I don't like that it's tightening the top there, so we can just kind of go and grab this, and no, I'm gonna go and delete this because I don't think it's bad that it's happening there. Now that selection I'm gonna feather, I don't know, 2.8 pictures, so I don't have a hard line going across it. And then in this map I'm just going to paste black into it, right? So we don't have that. So okay, so now this is really just kind of hitting up there. Hopefully that makes sense. Clark, yes we are. Welcome, my friend. We are lighting some stuff from normals. And so yeah, so just in a couple of minutes we have at least like a suggestion of a direction of light coming from this side. That's really, that's the basic principle. Let's go in and try and actually make something cool using this. So for this guy, I modeled a quick rock in the same way that I did kind of the cliffs before, and I think I used the same texture. And we ended up with this. Super boring render. Let's look at the channels that we kind of have to work with this. Obviously, there's no lighting information besides like AO. I have an actual AO pass here, what we might use. I have a multi-mat so that I can select things individually. And I have a script that does this, but if you guys render out RGB multi-mats, as opposed to having to find this layer and then go to channels and select all throughout it, you can go in there and just duplicate all of these, and then they just live over there. And so if you know you're going to be using them a lot, it's a good way to work. And now we don't even need this because this isn't containing any data that's not stored in these extra channels. So we have both normals ones. I'm going to put this one on top because I tend to use that one. And then we have, of course, a Z-depth layer, my personal favorite. And for those of you that are curious, yes, I did do a thumbnail for this idea. And I did it actually on pen and paper. And so for those of you that have seen me draw stuff in Photoshop for concepts and are wondering how to do it with paper, this is how I do it. Obviously, there's a lot of ways. But it's just a ballpoint pen. To give you an idea of like what the scale is. Can you guys hopefully see this? Hopefully you can see this. You can see like my finger next to it. The key that I found, and I learned this from Sid Mead from his Gnomon course, is to start very, very small so that you can't get bogged down in detail. And you can kind of see like these first kind of, I don't know, 1.5 cm by centimeter and a half drawings. There's just no room for any detail in there. So you're only kind of looking at like, what's the difference of how close these guys sit together? What if we put the rock in the middle? What if you put the rock off to the right? What if it's far away? It's easy to kind of imagine these changes, but I do find that actually drawing them and looking at them is super duper helpful as far as composition goes. It actually gives you 2D data for your brain to deal with and not think that it's dealing with. And so we tried a couple of different ideas when I kind of had a feel of where I thought I wanted things to go, which is kind of in this direction. I started a little bit bigger, and again, these are still only, 1 inch by 1 inch. What if we move the person close to the camera and this is in the distance? Didn't really like that. This one here I liked, as far as like it felt balanced as an overall whole. I did try it as a horizontal frame, which I think could be cool, but I didn't end up going that way. I tried kind of how far does this come in, which I thought, maybe less than that, but maybe a little that's cool. I also tried it as a vertical. And then I moved to a bigger one, which I messed up drawing the first time, and kind of everything was too far loaded to the left. And so this was the kind of final sketch that we went with. And this is the beautiful, beautiful rendering that arguably looks worse than the sketch that we're going to start from. From Milan, you could actually apply hue and saturation and then black and white layer on top of the normal map pass and put it on overlay and soft light. That will affect the whole scene, but you probably know that already. Yeah, so you can use it to kind of bring out details and stuff like that. And there's some tricks that you can do that actually portrait photographers do by generating a normal map and then painting in that to bring out detail where they want it and then to like smooth imperfections. It's one way to retouch things. I generally don't do that. I usually use this just for adding light, but it's really up to you. There are lots and lots of things that you could do, I guess is a better way to say it. Okay. So first let's kind of get, before we even start adding like light, let's get a little bit of like depth and control in this scene. And so let's grab my trusty old normal map. And I'm going to bring that on top and set that to soft light, I think. Or maybe multiply. Nope, soft light. So that we start to have a little bit of depth. And we can kind of bring this together just a bit. And let's maybe grab the AO pass up on top there and set that to multiply. So that we're building in. So we get a little bit of this texture back, right? It still doesn't feel like there's any light in the scene, but it visually is starting to make a little bit more sense. And let's not have this like solid white background. Let's go ahead and put like at least like a hint of a gradient in the sky. We got to invert that mask. I don't want to go that dark. I think something maybe like that. And we're just going to use a big gradient on this guy. Okay, that's not bad. And then I'm taking the whole scene and just kind of reducing contrast in it so that we have a place to go, right? So that we can go brighter and darker as we start to paint some things in. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I think I'm actually going to not use a normals map at first. And I'm going to paint in just a bit of kind of light and shadow into this. And how am I going to do this? I'm going to use a soft light layer. And I'm just going to use a big soft brush. Oops. Not that. I'm going to use a big soft brush. And just start to kind of paint a couple ideas in, because we can try to get an idea of what we want the scene to look like before we start adding in detail. So I'm just painting black into this, and we still have some things selected. And the goal with this, you can see like we kind of lose the sharpness of the rock when we paint these values in this way because we're using a soft brush. And you can imagine if we kept doing this whole time, we just end up with like a mishmash, mushy image, basically. But I think if we kind of get an idea of where we want the light coming in as a base pass, it'll make it easier for us to go in and actually paint textures back. Let's see here. Let's grab that. And we're going to need, the idea is that I have the light coming in from the left. That's kind of how I drew it initially. And so let's stick with it. So let's hide that, and let's paint in a little bit of shadows coming this way as though it was coming up over top of all that. And I think we're going to want it something like that. You have to bear with me on kind of all the guessing I'm doing right now. This is definitely a first for me. And I think we also, let's maybe take a big kind of, do we want to go painterly? I have the feeling we're going to go painterly on this. But either way, I'm going to put in like a little bit of a suggestion of some texture into the clouds. I take that back. If we were going to paint all these textures in with a painterly texture, we wouldn't need to use normal maps. So I'm going to undo that. And we'll use a cloud brush at a low opacity, just so that there's a little bit of shape in the sky here is kind of all I'm going for. And let's go up a little bit and flow, not that big. Maybe we go just a little bit brighter than that on there. Coming out over here, so we have a little bit of a gradient kind of in the clouds. And a little bit of shape in the sky. Yeah. Something like that is where we're going to start. And like you can see already, and this is kind of one of the problems that I ran into with the last image that I was making live, which is that you can see how like soft everything just became because we used a bunch of soft brushes. That's going to happen whenever you try to kind of paint values in like this. Now we could go in and not use normal maps and actually try to paint in some highlights and all that. But let's see if we can't use the normal maps to our advantage, which I think, fingers crossed, we're going to be able to do. So I'm going to go back to a soft brush here, and then let's go and let's start painting a few highlights in over on this side. I'll say okay to that. That didn't seem to work. And for something like that, we can actually probably go in and start to raise these up. And you can see how it's bringing texture back, right? And that's the advantage of this, is that we're bringing like that fine detail that was in the map back into the image. And of course we can go in, like, this is probably a little bit strong over here. What are we stuck on? You can see this effect over here. So we're just going to go and we're just painting back into this maps, which looks like that right now. And we're just going to, oops, other way. And we're just going to paint some black in the places where it added detail that I don't want it to come in. So we can do that. And then I'm just going to soften it a little bit down here on the bottom. This right side is going to kind of be the darkest. And so let's kind of grab these like orangey facing looking guys here, and you can get a preview of like the shape that you're working with there. Okay. That's looking pretty nice. So we'll do something like that. Now it's looking weird over here, so we'll deal with that separately. Though it is one of those things that maybe a little bit of that texture might be nice. Who knows? We'll find out later. We'll just paint out a bunch of that, and we'll paint out a little bit of this up towards the top. The upward facing surfaces would probably be a little bit lighter. So let's go ahead and kind of grab these topish ones. And for these ones, I think I'm going to paint. One of the nice things about like painting into these as opposed to just doing it as like a full layer mask is that you can start to kind of control obviously everything a bit better. And so you can just kind of, I feel like, you know, oops, wrong color. Nope. There we go. We need to get more highlights over on this side. So we'll tone that back just a little bit. Let's go back to our normals. And I'm just going to make this violet so it's nice and easy to find. What we really need is these kind of like greenish pixels over here on the far right. Far right. I think that's going to give it to us. Hiding that again so that we can see what we're doing. It's probably a little bit strong, but I think I'm going to try and overdo this just a little bit, and then we'll go back to it. And maybe this gets just a hint of it over here so that there's a little bit of life on this side. That's too much, but we'll fix that in a second. Oops. Okay. Okay. So now, like this kind of harsh change between like this mid gray and this black, I don't like at all. I think these colors to be darker. So we're going to keep on keeping on with the painting. I'm going to select some of these. When you see that little notice that it didn't select anything, it's most likely because I forgot to deselect the last time. And seeing if I have any questions. No questions. All right. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. Or if I'm just not making any sense, also let me know. I basically trying to figure this out as I go along, and so I'm sure that my explanation is not perfect. I'm going to go a little darker than that. I think it's just a little bit brighter actually than the dark that we want. So it's painting some of these kind of core shadows back up to 100%. Something going in there. Don't like that, but what I think is going to be the right method to do here is kind of try to get everything further along than it is right now, and then go back and start to refine, I think. Okay, so that was just trying to select some of the surfaces on the ground that are facing away from the light. And we're going to go ahead and paint these. Get some texture into this ground. And we can get a little bit in there too. Why not? Make it a little darker. Get some bigger shadows. And I feel like this, not only do we want this to be dark and in shadow over here, but I think also compositionally we're going to want that. Right, so that we have something that's starting to kind of go up towards our guy here, who we also need to adjust. Okay, so now we have a little ground. We can paint in a little bit in the background, so there's a little bit of detail in there. Let's fix that left edge, which I think will actually be easier to do just by, oops. I think it'll be easier to fix this guy actually painting it. All right, so we can just kind of hide that selection. And whenever you're doing this stuff, and I just want to reiterate what I said earlier, you can see that I'm constantly turning off that selection because I want to see exactly what the edge value contrast is. And if you have that like blinking black and white line, you can really only overdo the amount that you're creating there. Whereas if you go in and hide that selection, you can actually see, like if I wanted less contrast on this line, I can go in and paint just a little bit of light there, which is like a subtle change that will be very hard to actually like kind of visually see on the monitor with black and white flickering in between the two. And let's deselect, and let's go ahead and paint away this over here as well, because we need that to be darker. That line, and that line to be super clear. I think we want that to kind of fall away. I think that we also want, let's move that away from this guy. I think we want this foreground piece to be darker as well, especially down here at the bottom. So let's go ahead and paint that in. Okay. And now let's maybe get a little light. This is like that old guy I sculpted a while ago. Let's hide everything I don't need. I don't need this. Oh, I might need that. Don't need that. Let's pull that out. And we'll just group all those and turn them off so I know I don't need them. Okay. And let's delete that group. Delete group, group only. Okay, now we're working with fire. Okay, so we want to get I think probably, ooh, this is going to be a little bit tough. Maybe I shouldn't have left this texture on him, but let's see what we can do, right? It's supposed to be a challenge. Let's get a little bit of like the top surfaces. Cancel, deselect. Let's try that again. Let's get a little bit of these top surfaces and maybe a little bit of the back facing ones. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, son of a bitch. Dude, come on. One more time. Like I said, there's got to be a way probably to change that. I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to try and figure it out now. But I wish I had figured it out before I started doing this. Okay, so those are going to start to give us a little bit of variation in this dude. Let's go ahead and make that brighter. Hide all of that nonsense and see what happens. Hopefully you guys can see that on your screen. That we're starting to like kind of get a little bit of shadow in there. You can kind of see where this is like pretty rough and pixelated at the edges, but let's be honest, if we had a little bit of noise at this at the end, it's not going to matter. Let's set this to a screen layer so that I can paint black in without darkening things. And then let's kind of darken that side facing towards us. So who in the chat here is going to be going and checking out the London 3DS meetup after this? Michaela, I got to figure out how to say that. I'll probably get a refresher tonight. I believe you are speaking at it. In which case, rock on, good luck, and I'm excited to see what you have to say. I think that'll be fun. But yeah, what is everybody else doing on their Saturday? Jesus. Wednesday. Okay. Alright, so now he stands out a bit more. Let's work on this road a little bit. I want like a line coming down. Do I have a normal line that I can grab? Maybe we'll just grab the top ones. This is probably a decent point. So you can see that there's a little bit of like a shape to this, right? If I just go in with, let's make an overlay layer so we can paint with white and black. If I go in and I paint with white and a little bit of black, you can see that it just kind of affects everything the same. And obviously the bits that are facing back towards me aren't going to have any of this light. So what we can do is go in with the normals and then these upward facing ones, blues. If we select those, which is going to give us a lot of selection. But now it should be when we go in and paint with a little bit of, not that color, just plain old white, it doesn't actually touch those parts that should be in shadow. Oops. What just happened? Don't cut pixels. There we go. Don't know what keyboard shortcut I just pressed, but something. Alright, so let's get a little bit of a highlights kind of coming up here, a little here, maybe a little bits up here. And I'm going to zoom out so I can actually see what I'm doing. Because this is an overlay layer, if I paint with midtones gray, that like keeps it from doing anything. And so I want something heavy here. I know I want something heavy here. We're going to tone that back in just a second. I want, I think, a little bit softer there, and then what shape does this one be in? I think something like that might be nice. We'll just tone that down, effect down there, and then we'll paint it a little bit more in the back. Now that's gotten super dark, and we're going to use the Z-depth layer to go ahead and darken down some more fun in the front. All right. Clark, what are you in school for, my friend? And what kind of work do they have you doing over this? Or is it your kids? Don't you have two kids in their mid-age? Isn't that what I saw on Facebook earlier? 8 and 10, I think I remember. Hopefully you're teaching your kids some 3D, which I think would be the way to go. Okay, so we're starting to get somewhere, so let's start to kind of fix things. I kind of feel like we're starting to bring this into an overall composition, right? Especially considering that, what was the image that we started from? Beauty element. Let's put that down at the bottom. So far we've gone from that to this. I'd say it's getting somewhere. And I should check the time. 1:50, so we still have 10 minutes or so, 5-10 minutes. You do need to put them to work. If you're going to be responsible for teaching them all day long, and by the way, kudos to you for doing so, you might as well start getting something out of it. Our little one is only 20 months, so we have to entertain her, but we don't have to teach her anything. Right now, we're working on please and thank you. She's got please down, but she's not keen on thank you at all. Not even a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we can't start to kind of bring this a little bit more to life. I feel like we need to get some glints of highlights in the ground here. The ground feels dead. So what selection direction would that give us? None of them are. I wasn't paying attention to even what I was saying, so I'm not quite sure what that was. But Stefan's modeling a car. That sounds like fun. What kind of car are you working on, my friend? Modeling cars is a tough one, but fun. And is anybody going to take on the challenge of Fabio's Italian futuristic car? That's the question. What kind of brightness do we need on these? That starts to give it a little bit of light. Oops. We'll set this to screen so I can paint with black. And maybe we'll do something with the shadows. This needs, I wonder if we have any. We have little bits in here. I feel like this got just a bit dark. So maybe we'll bring in a little bit of light from wherever it happens to be selected right now. Ooh. That's kind of nice. Ooh. That kind of brings that alive just a little bit. '67 Ferrari 330 P4. I don't know if that's the Ferrari that's in my head right now, but if it is, rock on. That sounds awesome. And I guess as a general question to everybody, is what I'm doing kind of making sense? Or can you kind of see the ways that you could actually use this in a non-weird way? Which I'd say I'm using this in a pretty weird way at the moment, which I'm okay with because I'm enjoying this process, as challenging as it might be. But hopefully you guys can kind of get a sense of that from this, that if you want to go in and, you know, like I did in the last image, which was to separate those rocks, I wanted to grab just the faces that were at the far most kind of wrapping around. So this makes it really easy to select those. A little bit of detail, just barely into these shadows, so that they're not pitch black. Let's see where we have some stuff, see if it looks good. If it doesn't, we can delete it. This is kind of looking weird, so let's add in some stuff there. All right, now our main rock. Our main rock still looks a little bit like it's missing some colors. And by colors, I mean values. And I feel like those colors should be kind of in what would be a core shadow area. So kind of like coming in down here, I feel like we want some darkness. And maybe it's like right in there. Say okay. Well, that might be the ticket. Oops. Let's find out. So we want to go darker than this. We don't want to go full black. That is starting to look better. Emphasize the starting. I feel like this is one of those exercises that, much like actual like painting, it kind of forces you to really think about how, or at least it's forcing me to like really think about how light works, right? Because I'm trying to figure out where to put light. Like those values over here on the right that are brighter than this side don't feel right to me. But we are going to keep working on them. These guys here. Ooh, Leandro. I just got a pop up that you subscribed. I appreciate that, bud. Okay. Oh, yep, there you go. Yeah, so there's a little bit of, as I'm sure that I don't need to explain to you, but obviously I'm doing a decent amount of kind of guesswork with what I'm working on right now. I don't think that that's a bad thing, because I'm trying to kind of start to figure out what I'm doing. Kind of taking a step back, trying to look at it, seeing what is working, what's not. I don't like, I feel like we want an actual shadow kind of coming down. It's going to kind of come up. It's going to come something like that, I think, across the scene. Or no, I want it to come more, I want it to come just over this ridge line. Something like that, I think. And then we need a shadow for this guy as well. So that's going to be something like that, I think. And obviously it's not going to include that. Let's see what that looks like. Let's clip that to, nope. Because we want the road in that as well. So let's do that. And then we basically don't want that to affect the rocks, is what I'm trying to avoid. And so we're just going to go in here and paste. Sorry, I had kind of a mental fart there. And we need to kind of get rid of that line. There we go. Let's see if that helps or hurts us. I think we probably need to brush it a bit, and we don't need to actually darken some things. And I am going to paint this one, I think. So that's kind of doing what I'm doing, but not quite. So let's just paint into this layer. I want this shadow to be more kind of coming across this way. It would kind of duck down there. And this one, I think I want it to come more like this. And I think that we can darken down most of this building. You know, building, rock, same difference. Maybe I've been inside for too long. And let's also those are the rocks. And this part's still kind of like really bothering me, and as opposed to trying to find I feel like because that's in shadow, there should be much, much less contrast in it. Not quite that dark, something like that. And let's just go ahead and paint in some of these kind of core shadowy areas. Will kind of make it feel like a bit, parts of them are overhung. I do kind of like the way that those kind of stick out, but I don't like that little piece. That piece should go down. Clark, thank you, my man. I got to be honest. I'm not surprised that somebody can pull out this much depth in this image. I'm a bit surprised that I can. 2D painting is a thing that I would like to get better at, but it is not something that I've spent. It's not something that I'm currently thinking that I'm actually that good at. In time, let's go ahead and kind of paint in some of these colors. Again, every time I say colors, I obviously mean values. And I actually don't want that to be darkening the midtones. If you darken midtones, you're going to be adding contrast. If you just pull down the lights, you're going to be removing contrast. That's two different ways of darkening things. Which is to say, what are you trying to pull down? Are you trying to pull the shadows down, or are you trying to pull the highlights down? This side's getting a little bit dark, but that's okay. I do kind of like where this is getting. I want a little bit of surface detail in here. I think that'll do it. Yes, indeedy. As is the case with like anything else you've seen me do, from a Photoshop perspective, the only reason that I'm making any new layers is just so that I can individually turn it on and off, or like if I want to be able to paint and delete, it's easier just to make a new layer everywhere. That line does not look good, so we're just going to paint that out. Like that, like it better like that. I do kind of want like a little highlight up here. Another thing that you can kind of see me doing here that's worth kind of thinking about is painting in local values. So if I want this face that's under my cursor right now to feel a little bit darker, I select that color and just pull a little bit darker. You can see that starts to angle it down visually, down and away from the sunlight. Like this color, I feel like these are inverted up here. I feel like this should really be dark. Because we have a bunch of texture already in there, I'm not really too concerned that I'm kind of hiding it all. Just kind of paint that around. So that it kind of starts to group some of these shadows together and simplify the shadow shapes. You expect to see like kind of high contrast where light is hitting or kind of hitting things. You don't expect it in the shadows. That's still bothering me, so that's maybe for that one. I feel like we can grab these kind of upward facing colors and paint in just a little bit of detail into those, right? Anything that's facing up towards the sky is always going to be a little bit brighter. And again, just in the same layer, we're just going to grab some of these colors, go a little bit brighter, and see what kind of results we get. A little bit brighter, not that bright. And then let's go and grab something that should be darker, which is kind of these back faces. I'm just going to grab a bunch of them. And then interesting, at this point you can see that it feels like, because I've cast this whole bottom left corner into shadow, it basically feels like there's like a wall there now, which I'm okay with. It wasn't intentional, but I'm okay with that. Where's our sky? Just kind of. And well, I can use a little bit of texture in this, and then I'm just going to paint out. Oh, nope, not that much texture. Nope, nope, nope. Like that kind of helps a bit, and then maybe you've got a little bit of that coming down in here. Oh, we can't see that anyways. Now you can see this edge feels like it needs to get darker again. How are we doing on time? I feel like we're over time, and I think that means 3DS meetup is about to start. So I'm probably going to keep doing this just for fun and try to get it to a point where it's a little bit cooler. But hopefully that was helpful, and this will be like the extreme version of using normal maps. Usually I just use it to pull out little bits of detail. Or if you want light hitting a certain surface, you can pull it based off of where it is. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of how you guys can use it as well. Hopefully you learned something. Fingers crossed. Yeah, I'll show you where this ended up tomorrow. Or maybe I'll post it. Who knows? But this is a fun little exercise, and I feel like I'm learning something. I feel like things are kind of clicking, and I always like that feeling. If you don't have anything to do, the 3DS meetup I think is starting now, or just started 5 minutes ago. I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing on here tomorrow. Please feel free to DM me any ideas you have, but it'll be something. So thank you all for coming around and saying hello. I hope you're all doing well and staying sane and happy and as positive as you can at home right now. And I think I'm going to stop posting all this to my personal page, my Mike Golden Facebook page, because I'm just getting a ton of followers on that, which would be a good thing, but it seems a little weird in Facebook. So I'm going to stop posting things on that, and it's going to be on my Droki page. So if you find that and follow that, you'll get updated with what's going on or any news or anything like that. So I appreciate it. But yeah, thank you again, and we will see you same time tomorrow. Until then, be well. Later, guys. They really make it tough to kind of actually end these. You got to go all the way over to this screen, and then you got to hit 2 buttons.